on Wednesday, I was reporting on this, where we're talking about DHS revoking legal status for nearly 1 million people who are here either under TPS or currently entered under specifically the CBP-1 app, which was designed to try and track. I mean, I know that there are critiques, massive critiques of that, but was designed to track and monitor and really vet anyone coming into this country. Can you just talk about how these vetting mechanisms are now being weaponized against immigrants and what the impact of that is?
Absolutely. So with CBP-1, it really created an orderly system for people to apply for asylum or another type of relief at the US-Mexico border in particular. I definitely had a lot of critiques of it because not everyone had access to it. It wasn't in that many languages, like disabled people couldn't use it. We actually sued over the requirement that CBP-1 be used for people who wanted that path to citizenship through asylum. But the people who did wait for CBP-1 in many cases were waiting in Mexico for up to a year, living in squalid encampments, their kids maybe not in school, just like really horrible conditions, subject to violence, subject to trafficking, just to do things the right way. So we're talking about a population that sacrificed a lot to follow the law, and now that's being weaponized against them. And I would say too, for TPS or DACA, people did not need to register for those forms of relief. They could have just stayed in the US undocumented, but again, wanted to follow the law or wanted to enter on parole. And, now it's like even people who are paying taxes, right? The IRS is now going to share information with immigration. So basically, we're punishing everyone who has tried to be a model citizen and tried to have that path to citizenship. And it's really hard to know what to tell clients at this point, because now there's even another registration requirement for undocumented people. And I don't know what to tell people. Like, if you go register yourself, are you going to be disappeared to El Salvador? Are you going to be deported to a country that's not even yours? And again, like working with these individuals, all they want to do is follow the law, and all they want to do is gain permanent status in the US. And it's really hard to tell people how to do that safely now.
Well, can you tell me, I want to talk about the stuff, actually just briefly, let's just throw this up here. This is today, Social Security are listing thousands of migrants as dead to prompt them to, quote, self-deport. This kind of cruelty, I guess just try to sort of explain, like, even if people are issued Social Security numbers, that does not mean they're not voting with that. They're not citizens with that, but they have been paying into a system they might not ever reap the benefits of. Maybe just this, like, using IRS and Social Security data to go after, immigrants here. Like, can you just explain that a little bit and yeah, exactly. And like sort of dispel the myths around this idea that everyone who has a Social Security number is somehow like, living off the fat of the land?
So you get a Social Security number when you get a work permit. And usually it's a restricted Social Security number that just you can only use when you have the work permit. And then once you get a more permanent status like asylum or permanent residency, they remove the restrictions on your Social Security number. So just given how incompetent the Trump administration is, I can guarantee you that they are going to take Social Security numbers away from people who rightfully have them.
Yeah.
Probably naturalized citizens, probably lawful permanent residents, or people who still have valid work permits based on something other than parole, for example. So I can guarantee this is going to be a complete mess. But just more broadly than that, immigrants pay billions and billions and billions of dollars into Social Security. They make Social Security way more solvent than it would be if we didn't have them paying into it. I think the Republicans are in for a rude awakening when immigrants stop paying taxes. And just in terms of benefits, like, you're not eligible for benefits unless you're a permanent resident or a citizen. Asylum seekers are not eligible for benefits. Undocumented people are not eligible for benefits. Like, if you consider them sending their kids to school a benefit, there's something wrong with you. Like, if you want to take that away, I'm sorry. But other than that, they're not getting welfare. They're not getting food stamps. Like, they're not getting any of that. They're just, again, like you said, paying into a system they may never benefit from.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's really important because, it's amazing. Like, the average, God, I don't know, the myth around Americans is that we hate bureaucracy, you know, and there's so much red tape and everything. Try living a day in the immigration system. I mean, in the clients that you speak with, the statuses, the meetings, the this or that, and we're hearing and we know so many of the people who are being disappeared now, who are being swept up, were checking in with immigration officials regularly so that we know should they, and again, I hate to play into the myth, be up to any illicit activity that would be known about, right? Their whereabouts, their homes, their activities, people are being picked up on the job, which means they literally have a job. They're going to, this is not a drug dealer. This is not, anyone who is extorting somebody. Because it's easy, right? And it's easier to do that. And the Trump administration is, if not cruel, and they don't care. I did just want to ask you, when you're hearing from people about this idea of self-deporting, I know that, in Mexico, you've got President Claudia Sheinbaum saying, we welcome, our Mexican citizens back with open arms to help them reintegrate, whatever it is. Like, I guess I'm just like, what are you hearing from people? Is there an idea of like, it's not safe here, or no, it's less safe for where I'm from?
There's definitely people who, especially Mexicans, who like maybe they've worked in the United States their whole life, they have some money saved up, they can live a better life in Mexico at this point, and the president isn't a total fascist, so that's also helpful. So there has, and this has been true for years, there's more migration of Mexican people from the US back to Mexico than from Mexico to the United States. I think that's been true for maybe a decade or so. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's around that amount of time. Just anecdotally, I have seen more people moving back. And what's interesting is I'm seeing a lot of dual nationals, like US citizen / Mexican citizen kids of people who went to the United States for a better life, now realizing that they can have a better life in Mexico. So that's been really interesting to see. Yeah. But there's a lot of people who cannot go home, right? They fled persecution, they fled torture, like all the Haitians, the Venezuelans, the Nicaraguans, the Cubans who have parole that is now being revoked. We work a lot with the Haitian population, and the stories I hear of what people are going through and what people have gone through in their home country is just, it's hard to believe. I mean, I believe them, but it's really hard to believe that people can go through that and come out the other side. We talk to people who still have their kids stuck there or other family members stuck there, people who've lost children or other family members to violence there. And the thought of just ripping away their ability to survive and sending them back to a place like that is just unbelievable to me. It's so heartless. And it's obviously racist, right? They're targeting people from non-white countries, but yeah, I mean, people can't go home in a lot of cases. So, if their status is taken away, they're probably just going to try to write it out undocumented, to deal with all the fines that are being implemented, deal with their social security number being taken away. And it's like you said, a lot of these people are working. So like, what position does that leave them in now?
Yeah. I mean, and to say nothing of all the fear mongering around, they're eating the cats and dogs and all that. And, but I wanted to ask you, like, what is it? Just, I should have started with this, but I want people to know what Otro Lado does and who you're working with. And then I was really moved by specifically the work in Panama that you guys had done. I believe I donated. I was like, I really wanted to, and I believe everyone should. But, immigrants deported to Panama without any belongings, any family. I believe there were a lot of mostly Asian immigrants, but maybe explain what Otro Lado is doing, what you guys are up to.
Yeah, so we have a really close colleague who lives in Panama City, and she's worked with us over the years. And she called one day and was like, those people who were sent to the concentration camp in the middle of the jungle? Like, yeah, well, they just dropped them all off in the middle of Panama City with nothing. So basically, as we know, the Trump administration sent several hundred extra-continental migrants, which are just mostly people not from Latin America. There were some Colombians in the group as well. Mm-hmm. Panama agreed to accept them. Panama built a horrific encampment in the middle of the Darien. So people were initially locked as prisoners in a hotel, and then they were sent to this basically concentration camp. And we heard from a couple Colombians who were deported from there that the treatment was just so undignified. Like when they were given food, it was just thrown on the ground. They had to get it from the ground. There were kids there, a lot of children there. And so they were there for a few weeks. They deported anyone who was Latin American. And then I don't know why, but the Panamanian government just decided to close the camp and drop the rest of the people off in Panama City. So UNICEF is helping the families with kids, but the adults were just left like nothing, no money, no belongings. They don't speak Spanish. And so we were able to raise some money to help pay for shelter and food and medical care, because some of them have chronic health conditions, but also people have gotten like dengue fever, like just from being in the jungle. And yeah, or just even from being in detention, people got sick. And so so they've been there now for 30 days. We've been trying to get third countries to accept them. No country has stepped up, except fingers crossed for Colombia, that might take people. But again, like, they don't speak Spanish. Most of them, they're from Afghanistan, Iran. There's Cameroonians, some people from Ghana, Russia, China. I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple of the countries, but they're just lost. I mean, they can't go home.
Yeah.
And they can't apply for asylum in Panama. As it stands, no other country has committed to taking them. They have 60 more days in Panama. They got an extension on their visa. And we're scrambling to try to find other countries to take them right now.
And this is work that you all are doing. There is obviously some, but it's like all on the nonprofit sector to kind of fill in the gaps, because obviously the federal government's not doing anything about this, which is insane. And I just want to mention, it is insane, to say that there is no jurisdiction in El Salvador. Oh, because it's El Salvador, and we paid them $6 million, which is nothing, honestly, but far too much to keep what could be 90% of innocent people. I mean, no one, even if they did commit a crime, should be just disappeared and sent to a maximum detention center like that without any due process. But like, the idea that Trump's hands are tied. I mean, no one's talking about Panama, but it is wild to be like, okay, well, how much money did you receive to take care of these folks? And then you just like dump them and you're like, well, I don't know.
I mean, the U.S. should take them back. And in fact, some of them still have spouses detained in the United States who they might never see again. So we're trying to explore some possibility for some of them to come back to the United States. And in fact, there's a couple guys who refused to leave the concentration camp until they were sent back to the United States. So I think they're still there. But really, the U.S. has the responsibility to take these people back. They were legitimate asylum seekers. I heard the administration say, like, none of them are afraid to go home when they sent them to Panama. And from speaking to these folks, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Can I ask you, because I'm getting back to sort of like why we're in this place, something you said kind of echoed an interview I just did with attorney Michael Leroff of the 5-4 podcast, talking about, look, we're not at the beginning of the constitutional crisis, we're at the end of it. Mm-hmm. And the way that the Trump administration is able to skirt the law, I mean, you mentioned, well, that tracks, given that the Supreme Court, even though they handed this ruling down, also allowed them to avoid specifically immigration law. So you're just seeing that play out. We are far down the path of authoritarianism. And again, we don't have an opposition party. And if anything, we have a party that, I mean, Biden tried to pass this bipartisan bill, which, sure, there were some good things in it, maybe, making the immigration courts giving them a little bit more money, but ultimately was just as draconian. And, it's like we've been pulled so far to the right on this issue. And I think, given the moment we're in and giving sort of where we think about what are we fighting for if and when we get out of this moment, what do you think we're fighting for if and when we get out of this moment when it comes to immigrant rights in this country, in this hemisphere, in this just visionary for me, because we need it at this moment?
I don't know if I'll see the end of what we're experiencing now in my lifetime. Hopefully our kids will, because it really has gone down such a dark path to the point where immigrants are not seen as human beings anymore. I mean, no one's even talking about the fact that all of these deportations, a lot of them are family separations. Everyone was really mad about that a couple of years ago, but now it's like not even discussed. And I mean, I heard you talking about you have a kid. I do too. Imagine being separated from your child. Like, it's just the worst thing anyone can imagine. And no one's even considering that. We're just talking about immigrants in a vacuum, right? So it's hard to think that we would get from where we are now to a humane immigration system anytime soon. But the thing I always think about, because my parents are also immigrants to the United States, and I grew up in the US school system, and we're always taught that representative democracy is like the end all be all of political systems. And, you know, we talk about China being communist and how bad that is. Mm-hmm. And the thing that always strikes me is like, okay, representative democracy is the best, but you have millions and millions of people in the United States by design who will never be able to participate in that system. So, like, for me, the ideal is really, I mean, if you still believe in representative democracy, is to have a system where people have a path to citizenship. If you live in a society, you should have a say in what goes on in it.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, that just as a basic tenet, but like the whole border militarization thing is a money-making scheme. And so that's why I'm saying it's like hard to think about the way out of this, because there's so much money, billions and billions of dollars in violence against immigrants. And so
and it's part of the military industrial complex that's been now waged on the southern border on immigrants, the mass tracking, you've got Palantir involved, you've got other companies involved. Everyone wants a piece of this new, totalitarian fascist state, techno-fascist state, which is really, truly disgusting. I mean, I definitely think a pathway, but really amnesty. Like, that's what the right is like, oh, they want amnesty. Yeah, I do actually. I want open borders, actually. Like, that's just...
I know, yeah. That's what I was going to say, too. When they're like, oh, open, are you for open borders? I'm like, yeah, definitely. Because we should all be able to move.
Exactly. Yeah. I want people to move as freely as capital is able to move. It's what is just. These are workers. And I think that's the other question. And maybe where I draw some hope is looking at the times where the labor rights movement finally, and at the, with lots of pressure and organizing from immigrant workers, was able to see the, immigrant labor and, whatever, citizen American labor, if there is a distinction, as a one and the same kind of fight. And so, we're really in this moment, we're talking a lot about, all right, labor leaders, and maybe there's a general strike on the horizon, and yay, Starbucks, and it's great. But I also feel like without this piece of looking at the exploitation of immigrant labor, or how integral, no matter what your status is, immigrants are to this, I feel like we're kind of leaving like half the train behind, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, it's the other thing too, is just a lot of the pro-immigrant rhetoric is really focused on like economic contributions, and people are workers, and the economy needs people, but it's also like, they're human beings, right? Like, they've in many cases moved to survive, but even if they hadn't, even if they're just like economic migrants, or they're just moving for a job or a better life, like, who cares?
Right.
You shouldn't have to suffer to live in the United States. You should just be able to move wherever you want to move. And so, yeah, I just try to stay away from like only valuing immigrants as an economic entity, because that also contributes to the dehumanization of the population, I think.
Right. Absolutely. Seeing them. I mean, it's almost, yes, it's seeing anyone through like macroeconomic, I always push back whenever people talk about Palestinians only in this like geopolitical, what does Iran, what does, it's the same kind of level of dehumanization. Oh, you're not people, you're just kind of pawns. You don't have autonomy, hopes, dreams, families, roots, businesses, you're just kind of, being used by capital to move around. So I appreciate that critique, and I think that's important. And I also think that, look, this is a messaging problem for me. And I do think it's similar to the way I think about like trans rights, but really it's just like no human is illegal, period. Like that's it. It's always been that. It still is that for me. And the more we play into the like good immigrant, bad immigrant, right way, wrong way, criminal, non-criminal, they've given up the entire game. They know.
Exactly.
You hear Stephen Miller, Caroline Leavitt, they've never distinguished between law-abiding immigrant and, you know, hardened criminal. In fact, what they are doing is making, and I said this on Wednesday, making it far more dangerous in immigrant communities, giving rise to far more, if you're worried about drug, far more illicit activity, pushing people to never call the cops if they actually see something, because they live in the shadows. And so it's only making things more precarious. And again, we're kind of in this moment of like, Trump is doing the self-fulfilling prophecy thing to make fascism even more palatable and appetizing. And Democrats are not pulling away from that in a way that they should be.
No. And I'm beyond, I mean, I'm past being disappointed because I think after the first Trump administration, when Biden, do you remember the first Biden campaign? He ran on like the dream pro-immigrant platform. They were going to bring deported people back. They're going to reunify all the families. Like we work reunifying families who were separated during the first Trump administration. There's still probably like 800 of them still separated from their kids. So he didn't do all that. And to go from like, we're going to bring back the deportees, we're going to get rid of remain in Mexico. Remember that, where they were making everybody wait in Mexico for their asylum hearings, but then you create CBP1 and make people wait for a year in Mexico anyway. And this is something I wanted to bring up too, is this like externalization of the border, which has been going on now for decades. And this idea of just like making people wait in Mexico, strengthening the southern Mexican border, deporting people to Panama and El Salvador and other countries. Like third country deportations have been going on for years now. It's just kind of like not sending people to Sitka necessarily, but like this has been going on for years. So like kind of like what you were mentioning earlier, this is like the end of a progression that has been happening for a very long time. And very few, if any, Democrats have spoken up against it.
Right. I mean, it's like, this is the cruelty and we knew it was going to happen. And yeah, I mean, I really thought that, I mean, Trump's performance in the debates, or not the debates, the town halls in Las Vegas, awful. But Kamala Harris's were also bad. You have a woman in tears saying that she's worried for her mother. And like, I don't know what else you need to do. Like, how many people do you need to see separated from? And there was recent video of a woman, ice breaks through the car door to grab her mother. And this woman, I mean, she must be, you know, in her teens, 20s, but you hear her reduced, you know, she's a little baby. That's her mom, you know, and it's just like, and that's happening everywhere. It's happening over and over again. You know, it's interesting that in Tom Homan's hometown, successfully, the community was able to come out and stop it. So, I mean, and I do think a lot of that community use their privilege. So just to say like, and I know you guys also facilitate some volunteer opportunities. So I just want to ask you about that too. But people, especially if you have status, especially if you have white privilege, especially if you have a little extra time, like use that, because you can, you know, you can apply pressure. This administration I do think they aren't totally above pressure.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you are right. I think economic pressure is probably a little bit more effective than I really don't think they care about the lives of immigrants or care about anyone who cares about the lives of immigrants. And I think what you're saying about like using your privilege is so important, because we are about to see immigrant rights activists, and we're already seeing it, right? People who are immigrants and activists being disappeared. And we're about to see persecution like we saw it in the first Trump administration to a lesser degree. But those of us who've been on the front lines, I expect a DOJ investigation. I expect to get hauled before Congress, because they've made caring about immigrants a crime. They've made helping people a crime at this point.
I think, I don't know if there are more, but Alfredo Juarez Zeferino, Jeanette Vizquera, those are two immigrant rights activists who've been detained, I believe.
Yep.
So this is exactly what you're saying. It's like, And thank you for even speaking to me. You know, I mean, I think people are rightfully scared. But also this is the work that you do. Before you go, how can people, what are you suggesting folks do? Donate, just sign up for your mailing list, or how can people get involved?
Well, we just had $2 million cut of our federal funding. So definitely any donations would be very useful right now. Specifically, our funding was cut to represent unaccompanied children in court. So we are not going to abandon those kids. We just have to figure out a way to pay to continue representation. So our website is alotrolado.org. So you can go there and donate. There's also a volunteer page. You can sign up to volunteer either in person at the border or remotely. We have plenty of volunteer opportunities for folks. And I would also just suggest, like, I know a lot of places have rapid response networks locally. Just get involved in your local community. If you see ICE, say something, scream so your neighbors don't come out of the house, but really getting involved in those local organizing efforts is so important because these are your neighbors. These are people in our community that deserve protection. And if you are especially a white American citizen, like, get your butt out there on the line because there's other people have a lot more to lose than you do. So,
yeah. Thank you so much, Erika Pinheiro, Executive Director of Al Otro Lado, that's just done some incredible work. Please donate to them if you can. Again, we want to make up for that money, and we shouldn't have to, but we will, because we support all the work that you're doing. We should also fight for, federal funding to not be cut. But is there anything else that you wanted to add before I let you go?
No, just thank you so much for having me. It was really great talking to you. And yeah, I just encourage people to get involved and, you can sign up to volunteer with us if you'd like to do that. We'd really appreciate it.
Awesome.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/bitchuation room. Do